Why is this so out of focus? I don't know. But it is live, and because I've had a few technical difficulties in the last few days, I'm just going to take it as it is here. This next chapter, I'm reading Bliss, Afterlife, a story I started 15 years ago, and what I'm reading now is 15 years old, because a big part of it was written a long time ago on a business trip. It started and continued over the next few years because I loved making up this wonderful story. It was a journey, and I want it out there. It is not published yet. So I finished with chapter 21 with Natalie, who was very unhappy and had decided to take her own life on this Tuesday. Chapter 22, The Refuge. Chris turned up very early at the Refuge. He is the husband of Holly, lives by the south coast and has retired and is helping his sister-in-law Susan, who is running a refuge. Susan had asked him to have a look at a few things. There was a problem with the light in the kitchen, and there were a number of floorboards which needed a few nails, etc. Chris enjoyed helping in the refuge. Holly was always busy, and since he had retired, he enjoyed spending his days according to his own agenda. There always seemed to be a lot to do, and when he enjoyed doing nothing at all apart from reading his book and doing his crosswords, no one seemed to expect too many explanations. He loved the drive from the coast to London. Although it was horrible in winter and he had actually arrived last night already, and he spent the night at Suzanne's house, which was 5 minutes away from the refuge. They had a small team of people. Someone always stayed at the refuge at night, but Susan was at her home. He let himself into the house. It was very quiet, and he made himself a tea in the kitchen. He liked the place quiet and peaceful. Although he knew there were a lot of people in the house, he had his tea in the kitchen in quiet contemplation, trying to remember who exactly was here at the moment. There was Rosie and her 5 children. Unfortunately, she was a regular. This time he had overstepped the mark, though. Not only had he battered her, but also 2 of her older children, Mark, who was 11, and Philip, who was 13. And Mark had hit his head rather badly on the mantelpiece, so when they all went to the hospital, the drama really started. And once they had all been patched up, Suzanne had sorted a large room for them, the old parlour, in fact. And then they had Isabella and her 3 kids, Sophia with her son, and Sinead with her 3 of her 8 children, and Dilly with her son Winston. And then there was Natalie. She was a bit of a worry to Sabine and to Suzanne, and Chris had a strange feeling when he thought of her name. It was nearly 8 a.m. and the house had definitely started to stir. Children appeared at the kitchen door and he started to prepare breakfast. The day had definitely begun. Chris only started to wind down when the kitchen clock showed 11, and he thought of having a quiet cup of tea when he realized he had not seen Natalie at all. Everyone else had been around eating, laughing and fighting. All the children had gone off to school or out. He decided to have a look upstairs. He had tried the door, but it was locked from the inside. The key was still in there and he could not see anything. He banged and shouted, but there was no noise. Somehow he knew this was definitely bad news. He found Suzanne at home and then rammed his whole body against the door and it flew open. Natalie was lying on her bed. There were tablets still around her on the floor and on the bed, along with an empty bottle she had thrown up at some point, but looking at her face he realized that she was no longer alive. There was an envelope on the table and he decided to read the letter which was inside. Dear Sabine or Chris, dear Suzanne or Chris, whoever is reading this will realize that I have taken my own life. It sounds so dramatic. I'm writing this here with the full intention not to see another day here, and it feels strange. But I am so relieved that I've taken this step and this decision. I almost did this without leaving you a note. That Despite my deep unhappiness, I must tell you that I loved you both. And I felt it was not fair to leave without any explanation. I have not often met people in my life who almost selflessly help others. You have both been such big hearts, and I am so very glad I met you, just in time. I know you would have found a way to stop me doing this, but I don't want to be helped. Sorry. I had enough of it all. I think I will be better off dead. My mum will be sad, but she never really thought about anyone else except herself. I tried so hard to be loved, but I had just too much of all the selfishness and greediness. I know I'm young, but I can make my own decision if I want to live or die, and I decided that I'd rather not live or be dead. Please forgive me for the trouble I shall be causing you. I hope it will not disrupt the house too much. There are so many problems and people here with so much worry and so much cruelty. I cannot and will not stand it any longer. I shall just go to sleep and not wake up anymore. Lots of love, Natalie. Chris could feel the tears running down his face. He heard the front door slam, and there was Susan, wild-eyed. She just took one look and her eyes filled. How sad. I knew there was something extra sad about her. They took the letter downstairs and Susan phoned the police, making a cup of tea at the same time. They sat down and talked about Natalie. Both had felt that she had been so very serious, and the darkness which had been there the first day had not lifted once. Even when the whole lot of them had dinner a couple of times last week, the big dinners when everyone in the house comes to eat at the same time are just great. There's always so much laughter and banter and stories. Most children coming here are so used to awful atmosphere in the family groups they lived in that the conversations can be hilarious. The smallest of the kids come up with such wisecracks that Susan never knew whether to laugh or cry about the wry humour she encountered weekly here. Often there was a competition whose dad or mum's friend had been the most objectionable. Chris often had to think about the famous Monty Python sketch about living in a cardboard box in the middle of the road. Natalie had not taken part at all, and that had worried them both. However, Susan as well as Chris totally accepted that she had taken this decision and executed it perfectly. Both had had many conversations about this very thing. It had happened before, and both did not agonize or feel guilty in any way that this was not prevented. Natalie had decided to die, and if she had wanted to be saved, then this house would have been the right place to accept the saving. She had not wanted to live any longer, and as far as they were both concerned, that was her prerogative. Believing in reincarnation has its advantages because death can be so much easier to accept as a beginning of a continuation. The police eventually arrived and they got into action. There was a lot to tackle. Just for the better mood, I am reading chapter 23, Natalie Meets Bliss. When Natalie felt herself losing consciousness, all fear disappeared, and she just let herself go. After what seemed a long time, she felt a wonderful feeling of warmth and light. She was aware of vast space around her, and a calm voice entered her awareness. Yes, here you are, my dear. You did indeed succeed in leaving your body. It was too damaged after the tablets, and you left it. Bliss was waiting for the young girl to become accustomed to the state of being. She had expected her. Natalie looked around and she understood. She saw the aura of Bliss as well as her grandmother and favorite aunt, who had both passed away many years ago. She also saw two large, bright beings. They all loved her. Bliss smiled at her and they all embraced warmly. Natalie suddenly had an overwhelming sense of regret. She had decided to return early. Suddenly, she had a clear vision of what her life had been about. There was always free will. Suddenly, she realized everybody can choose to end their life whenever they desire. There is no hell or damnation for such a decision when the soul leaves the body. But the concept of suicide is never really a solution. She could only see this now, and she realized that this was not the first time she had chosen to cut short her experiences of physical existence. She had again not lived consciously and thoughtfully. The refuge she had found was to be her way out of the misery. She had lived through that misery for a long time. She could have followed her chosen path, but she had been too overwhelmed by her own despair. What a pity, she thought. I gave myself barely 18 years to accomplish what I had been destined for to accomplish in over 80 years. Bliss smiled at her. Don't be too disappointed. There is no room for this here. You will have time to consider your last life, and you can decide to learn the lessons once you have rested. Let us go and find your group. This will make you understand more, and you will be able to find a way to see ahead. Natalia's grandmother and aunt took her between them, and they joined the streams of bubbles to meet with her soul group and to start her work. This was not needed for this. The first impressions for the new returning souls are important, but Natalie had not long left the realm of soul existence, and her being will adjust very quickly. She will find a solution for herself quite easily. Bliss could always understand the difficulties facing the physical life. She had had many long lives and often faced the agony of despair. God was such a vague concept for many. Bliss herself in her last life had been resolutely against organized religion. She abhorred any dogma, and when God was mentioned, she remembered often recoiling in rejection. Somehow she had always been quite sure that there was more things between heaven and earth than we knew. But there had been too much negative history in relation to religion for her to believe in a God who punishes children who have not been baptized, or who promises the concept of hell for wrongdoing. Of course, coming back home here, every soul recognizes the very different purpose of life and also of God. Humanity always knew deep down that one life, birth and death, accomplished in however many years, is not the whole span of existence. The complexity of the human body and all living things should really give us a pretty good idea that such a short period of time would be a waste of effort. Creation is a process which takes place continuously, and we have made our physical existence a battlefield for most of us. It seems there have been many bringers of truth through the ages, but as it is always retold by other people, the essence is often lost, and interpretation is what is distorting the meanings. Bliss remembered reading the biography of Edgar Cayce, There Is a River. When she was in her late 40s, she remembered crying when she was reading paragraphs to her daughter, which evidenced the wisdom Edgar was able to give while he was asleep or in a trance. His whole history and all readings are documented, and there is such wisdom here, which would be of great benefit to humanity. But he died, and the world went on in its normal way, with pharmaceutical companies providing the medicines which initially might have helped but rarely went to the root of the problem, and which often were a poor substitute for things nature was already providing. But it is a profitable business, and the more people fall ill, the more money is made. And how often do people take a whole array of medications for many years, never knowing the root of the problem, treating side effects with ever more drugs to bear life. During all her last lifetimes, society was inventing technological things which aimed at speeding up everything. It seemed making things ever smaller and ever faster was the be and end all of everything. It had often seemed to Bliss that life had started to run in fifth gear most of the time. She smiled, remembering her husband saying that since broadband had been invented, life was just too slow. When are we going to see that there is so much on this lovely planet Earth? Enough for everyone. Of course, we are all meant to go through the lives afresh at every incarnation, although everyone knows that all over the world there are so many very young people who have great talent or aptitude for certain skills that we should have a clue that this knowledge is a result of many incarnations. Mozart was a genius. In fact, he was already a genius in his last existence. But it was in the 12th century, and there are no records of this wonderful musician who made all his own instruments and who never lacked food or drink, as anyone and everyone would flock to hear him perform. He brought a lot of joy then, although he did like the mead a little too much, and an infection killed him in his early 30s there as well. So, I think I finished this here now, and chapter 24 is the next one, and I hope you have a lovely Sunday. And I had a wonderful solstice event last night at what we call the Ancient Technology Center, with drumming and singing, and I think I'm going to continue celebrating the solstice until it actually is the solstice, which is next Tuesday. Have a good day.